Welcome back to The Hit. Joining me now from Los Angeles is Congresswoman Judy Chu. She is the first Chinese-American woman elected to the United States Congress. Congresswoman Chu, Happy New Year and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What is your assessment of the New York school holiday development? It's a pretty big deal, isn't it?
It is. It's huge. I really have to commend Mayor de Blasio for supporting this effort and for celebrating the different cultures that exist within New York City. Of course, this Lunar New Year is celebrated in Asia to a great extent, and they do have a closure of the schools, if not the whole area, and it is a wonderful step forward to be able to have that happen in New York City.
Now, in 2009, you were elected Congresswoman. That's a national office in the United States. That in itself was a significant milestone, but why did it take so long when one considers that Chinese Americans have been here for a long time and have played a big role in this country's development for a long time?
Well, there were many discriminatory laws that were passed in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, such as the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And they actually prevented the Chinese from becoming naturalized citizens and from being able to vote. It was not until 1943 that that was repealed, and it took a long time for Chinese Americans to get involved in the political system as a result. But most recently, Chinese Americans have formed advocacy organizations, and it's led to a growth of Chinese Americans that are getting involved in politics.
Now, how important was your election? As I said, you occupy national office right now. You represent your constituents right here in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. Do you see this as a major breakthrough?
Well, it was something that was applauded and celebrated by Chinese Americans all across the nation. I was so very, very glad to be able to have this breakthrough role, but it really is only the beginning. As a matter of fact, one of the first things I did was to have an expression of regret that was passed by Congress for the Chinese Exclusion Act, and I felt that that was a very, very significant thing to do in light of what had happened in the past, but it also said we must move forward.
And was that expression of regret, was that passed?
Yes, it was passed unanimously by both the Senate and by the House 130 years after this law was first passed in 1882.
I want to ask you a question that I just asked our previous guest, Evan Lau. You know, there are other minority groups in the United States, like Latinos and African Americans. They've been relatively successful in organizing themselves politically, fighting for their rights, etc. Do Chinese Americans need to do the same right now?
Well, Chinese Americans are getting involved and are developing strong national advocacy groups. For instance, the Organization of Chinese Americans is a national organization that has many chapters, as well as the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. And they do get involved in many issues. In fact, they were very helpful to me on this bill regarding the Chinese Exclusion Act. But they also have been active on immigration reform, as well as speaking out against the terrible stereotypic and ugly statements that have been made recently on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, as well as by Bill Beckel.
According to U.S. Census Bureau figures, Asians are the fastest growing racial group in the United States. So with that in mind, are we going to see a lot more people get involved politically, be representatives or represent Chinese people or all American people in high office?
Well, we're working hard to make this happen. There are many internships that have been developed all across the nation. In fact, I have quite a few interns myself from these national organizations so that we can expose the young people to politics. But not only that, we have encouraged Chinese Americans to raise up their voices on issues of concern to them. And in fact, it was really wonderful for me to see people mobilize to get this apology for the Chinese Exclusion Act passed. They were everywhere from New Mexico to Colorado to places where you would not expect, but they did do as much as they could to get it passed.
You mentioned just a moment ago the stereotyping of Chinese Americans on comedy shows especially. We've seen that. It's caused a lot of controversy. how big is the problem of discrimination against Chinese Americans?
Well, we were really shocked when on the Jimmy Kimmel show, Jimmy Kimmel had a kids talk show, and he asked what to do about the debt held by China. And one kid said, "Kill all the Chinese." And instead of shutting that down, Jimmy Kimmel made more jokes about it and said, "Well, should we kill all the Chinese or should we let them live?" And that was incredibly offensive to Chinese Americans. It's that kind of thing that we want to stop. Fortunately, Chinese Americans did mobilize and rally against that, and Jimmy Kimmel actually apologized and took off the whole Kids Talk segment from his show. But it's things like that. Bob Beckel then, only a few months later, said that on his Fox talk show that the Chinese are here as students only so that they can be spies for China. And he did this broad brush stereotype of all the Chinese students in this country. Those are the kind of stereotypes that we are fighting.
Now that China rivals the United States as a major power, certainly as an economic power, we've seen its massive economic growth over the last few years. How will this impact Chinese Americans? Could it help further integrate them into American society, or could it lead to some Americans actually viewing Chinese with perhaps a bit more suspicion?
Well, we are looking very carefully at the kinds of statements that are made and the kinds of depictions of the Chinese as a result of the fact that China is rising as a power. And we have noted that, especially during campaigns, there are many more stereotypical commercials that are on TV. For instance, when there was a Senate race in Michigan, one of the candidates against Debbie Stabenow actually had a commercial where he had a woman in a rice paddy go on a bicycle and go up to the camera and say, "Isn't it great that we get to steal your American jobs?" Well, it was really, really outrageous, and so we demanded that that commercial be taken down. But those are the kind of stereotypical commercials that actually could cause more harm and could paint all Chinese Americans with a broad brush.
Congresswoman Judy Chu, Happy New Year again. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your time. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. We'd love to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and story ideas to theheat@cctv-america.com. And we'd like to continue the conversation on social media. Give us your thoughts and comments on our Facebook page. That's at cctv-america. I'm Arnold Nido in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.